Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Tonight we are here to talk about the humanity of Muhammad, a Christian view by Dr. Craig Considine. So my name is Ali Ak. I am your moderator tonight. I work as the outreach coordinator for Chestnut Retreat Center. Chestnut Retreat Center, CRC, is a place for religious activities, spiritual growth. CRC also organizes interfaith and intercultural dialogue programs, events. In addition, CRC puts great emphasis on education. So when I was defining the functions of CRC, the first thing that came to my mind is your book. It was kind of a match. So in terms of dialogue and educational activities, we host Mr. Fethullah Gülen, and he holds study circles daily. So it's the main educational activity that we have. And in addition to that, we have summer and weekend schools for the kids. We arrange book talks and seminars, and also some social responsibility projects. If you want to learn more about CRC, you can go to our website and social media accounts. But tonight is not about CRC. Tonight is about the humanity of Muhammad. So this is the first online book talk that CRC organizes. So thank you for, again, accepting our invitation, Dr. Considine. And it will continue with other books from different backgrounds, from different cultures, from different religions. So Dr. Considine, the author of The Humanity of Muhammad, a Christian View, is a scholar, professor, global speaker, media contributor, and public intellectual based at the Department of Sociology at Rice University. So today we are going to talk about his book, The Humanity of Muhammad, a Christian View. Welcome, Dr. Considine. We are delighted to have you tonight.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and honor to join you on this Saturday evening. And thank you to the Chestnut Retreat Center, the CRC, and Ali, of course, to you, the moderator, and to all of you who are joining. I'm looking forward to a delightful conversation.
Me too. So, Dr. Craig Considine, when I look at the book, the first question for me was, what is this image? So the cover picture, I had a tough time understanding it, but I kind of figured out something, but I'm not sure whether it's correct or not. Can you a little bit talk about the cover picture, please?
Yeah, so the two words that come to mind, Ali, both start with a B, and these two terms are beauty and blending. When I think about the vision that Muhammad had for not only the Ummah, but the world. And when I see his engagement with, a lot of different people in society, not just the elites and his enemies, but also those on the periphery, people who didn't look like the normal people. He's engaging with these people, and he's trying to bring them into the fold of his beliefs, of his ummah, of his community. And as a Christian, these are the things that make me a Christian, like fundamentally, because when I think about Jesus's life and legacy, I also think about this beautiful activity in this beautiful image of society, which is compassionate. It's inclusive. It's loving. It's caring. It's forgiving. Some very fundamental, deeply spiritual and moral things. The second term is blending. And when I think again about, of course, this cover, like if I think I actually have a book. For those who may not have seen it. Yeah, so it's kind of like, it's colorful, it's definitely artistic, but it's hard to place, like you can kind of understand what's happening. There's some figures here, but like there's all these colors and like things are just kind of morphing and blending. And this is where the second B word comes from, blending. again, with Muhammad's vision of the Ummah, and again, I mentioned the Ummah could be a nation, but the Ummah could also be a vision of the world, of our planet, and of our human race. And I think Muhammad, in many ways, and I think I make this point throughout the book, like he was trying to create a vision of society that transcended specific categories in a lot of ways. You know, these kind of rigid principles of race, ethnicity, religion, and he was trying to create something that blended into something that was hard to place. And in the book, I call it a civic nation, and I'm sure we can get into that later. So beauty and blending, I think, for some reason, is how I describe the cover of that book.
Thank you. Before we go into the content of the book, another question was about the title of the book. So if I'm not mistaken, some of the chapters were written before for several places, different places, Huffington Post and articles, and you kind of rearranged them to make them a book, and you came up with the title. Can you talk a bit about how you came up with that title?
Yeah, you know, I was working with the Blue Dome Press in terms of the proper title. And you know, it's funny, like now that I think about it, I think that was always The Humanity of Muhammad was the title from the very beginning, which is interesting. And that leads me to think, and I'm sure it leads the folks at Blue Dome Press to think as well, that we were pretty confident in our argument on this idea of the humanity of Muhammad. But yes, this book is a collection of a lot of my previous research and kind of, you know, morphing it and changing it, linking it more to sociological concepts. And yeah, I suppose going back to this article I mentioned earlier, before we actually started the recording, one of the first articles I wrote about Prophet Muhammad was from, I think it was 2013 or 2014. And this article, which was published on the Huffington Post, ended up being picked up by Fox, and it became, you know, big on the blogosphere. But it was called An Unlikely Connection Between Washington and Muhammad, I think the name was. So I looked at George Washington, the first president of the United States. He wrote a book called Rules of Civility. And I also compared passages of rules of civility to not only the Quran, but also the Hadith. And the point I was really trying to make were, like, you know, here are these two figures that a lot of people would never compare to begin with. They would never link in any formal manner, really. They seem like complete opposites. But when you look at some of the material that they actually offered, a lot of it had to do with humanity, and actually at a very micro level, about like treating every single person that you come across as if they are the most powerful person in the world. So everyone gets treated with respect, dignity, a smile, like very, very kind of powerful micro sociological issues. And like, I just found that very powerful as someone that had that, Muhammad had that character and conduct. You know, like one of my favorite stories, if you want to call it that, with him, with Muhammad, is like he would never want to release his hand first in a handshake just to be endearing. I mean, that to me just brings a smile to my face. Like those are the type of people who I appreciate. And of course, as I mentioned, those were micro sociological things. And then when you go to the macro sociological things, such as his vision for the Ummah as a civic nation, his engagement with religious pluralism, his stance on anti-racism, humanity comes out in these things as well. So there's a lot of reasons, I suppose, why we settled on this title.
Thank you for that. When you were talking about that handshaking experience or handshaking story, I was a student of Islamic theology, and it was kind of a shocking to me that we are pretty much busy with the details and the theological discussions and the juristical discussions and everything, but we forget sometimes about the humanity, basic things, the humanity of the Prophet Muhammad. So thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for writing that book. So this is a recent book, but if you were to retitle it or add any chapter or anything in the book, would you do such thing, or everything is the same?
Well, I would if you gave me a second chance to do anything, I would seek a way to improve on the initial action or product. So yes, I would absolutely add to it. And I think the one thing that sticks out is the chapter on women's rights. So I focused pretty much solely on the life of Khadija and Aisha. And I made some parallels to the contemporary context in terms of women's rights as it pertains to hijab, observing hijab. I think I could have gone deeper into this issue. I don't think I glossed over anything important, but this is such a major issue for a lot of people around the world, especially women. And, being in my shoes, when you actually hear more frequently than other issues, like, Muslim women saying, I wish you had written more. I mean, that's happened to me multiple times. And actually, in some men, and not only Muslim men, just men in general, are like, you should have written more about the women's issue. So I think I would probably expand that chapter. If I were to add a different theme, that's a good question. If I were to add a different theme, it would obviously have to be sociological, considering my background. But I can't say I'd add another chapter. I think I would expand on the chapters themselves in like a second edition. And like, for instance, the longest chapter is Seeking Knowledge, which is chapter 4. And it's actually like almost triply long. Like it's more than double the other chapters. So maybe expanding the other chapters and elaborating a bit more. I wanted to create a concise, or we wanted to create a concise book, straightforward, relevant in terms of the contemporary context, easy to digest with sociological concepts. Maybe we could have just written more because it's a short book, really.
But it is easy to read. I mean, I really enjoyed the book. This was the second time reading the book. So one of the things that kind of stand out for me was your experience with Professor Akbar Ahmed's course. So I define it kind of a turning point in your perception of Islam. Can you talk a bit more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Ali, let me first say, before I get into the answer, these first 3 questions that you've raised are great. I've never had these questions before, so they're very unique, and it's bringing out a different side of me and the book that I guess you don't see elsewhere. And it's funny, you bring up Dr. Ahmed, and Ali, you mentioned, how did he change your perception? And I think when I think about even that question, I think a better way of putting it is like, what did he introduce? Because I actually had no perception, like it was almost like a blank slate. I mean, it was slightly skewed, of course, right? Because of 9/11. And I talk about the impact that 9/11 had on me. I'm from Boston, kind of rough and tough Boston. Let's be patriotic, blah, blah, blah. You do get a lot of that. And as a product of my environment, that's who I was. And I get to American University, and I'm trying to either go into the State Department or the intelligence agency, and I'm taking Arabic and trying to figure out why something like 9/11 happened. And I enter into Professor Ahmed's course at American University, really with those 9/11 ideas in mind. That was like the frame in which I saw it. But I was also like coming in curious. So I was I had a lot of questions that I think if a lot of Muslims were asked, like they would be uncomfortable. You know, they'd be like, oh, this person is associating like Islam with violence and like talking about Islam through the prism of Al Qaeda or something like that. So I was kind of in that ballpark. And then, you know, Professor Ahmed, a sage, a legend, a philosopher, um, a good man, if not great man. I was so lucky to be a student in his course, honestly, in 2004, right after Iraq, the invasion of Iraq. And what stuck out to me about his approach to, you know, communicating this big idea of Islam to me, someone who had no idea what that term even meant or could have meant, Professor Ahmed just starts focusing on knowledge, the importance that the Islamic tradition placed on knowledge. And for me, it resonated because that's why I went to college. I was searching for knowledge. And he's telling me that this tradition, this religion that I knew nothing about is emphasizing that. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. What type of knowledge? And then Professor Ahmed, being who he is, he shapes things in an interfaith way. So like that interfaith angle of knowledge was my introduction to this entire field of, honestly, for me, it's even bigger than Islam and Christian Muslim relations. It's religion in general. Growing up in Boston in a pretty secular society, I mean, religion, we were Catholic, like we knew that, but religion wasn't, you know, it's America. A lot of people are irreligious, they're secular. So Professor Ahmed had a massive impact on me, not just for academic purposes, but personal, spiritual, and human purposes. Great man.
So, I was more curious about the Akbar Ahmed course. So I believe you were curious to learn the reality, and it is really important, you know, to be fair, to be open to the reality. So were you in any way questioning the media narrative about Islam before that course?
Yeah, for sure. No question about it. And to put it into historical context, you know, we're talking about 2001, 9/11, 2000, later in 2001, the military operation of Afghanistan started. Then you have 2003, the invasion of Iraq. And as a young man, I'm 15, 16, let's see, 16, 17, 18 years old at these times. There are no Muslims in my town. The closest mosque to Needham, where I grew up, is 9 miles in Roxbury. Never taught Islam in Catholic school. Never taught Islamic history or Islamic civilization in public school. So when you are fed, again, early 2000s, when the media is like taking off, you know what I mean? Like this is post.com boom. And now the media is taking over. So we are fed. And when I say we, the nation, anyone who lives in this country, you're thrown on your TV, you're just being fed these images, these narratives. And like they stick out to me even today. You know, it's like with Afghanistan, it was like all Muslim women in these massive cloaks, and then men with guns, and like basically depicting these people like just human beings as like these are the people that did this to us. And that's just completely inaccurate in so many ways. I mean, it's a intellectual crime to suggest some things. So these things absolutely impacted the overall frame. You know, seeing Islam through the prism of terrorism, violence, oppression. That's what was fed to the American people. And there are many people like me who never kind of saw the light bulb go off. And they're kind of still thinking the same things, which is unfortunate.
Thank you. I believe it's in the introduction chapter. You talk about how Muslims made you a better Christian. And the first chapter, religious pluralism. when I was a student at Hartford Seminary, interreligious and interdialogue school. So the motto of the Hartford Seminary is exploring differences and deepening faith and your belief. So when you explore others, you in a way deepen your own faith. So can you a little bit talk about that, being a better Christian after learning Islam or meeting Muslims?
These are good questions. Yeah. And I love that. I love that quote, exploring differences, deepening faiths. That's beautiful. And Hartford Seminary is not too far from Boston. And I've never visited Hartford Seminary, but I'd love to. And Ali, you're very lucky. A few things I would say. I mean, it's such a massive issue, and it happened over so many years and so organically that it's hard to kind of pinpoint how exactly the Islamic faith shaped my own faith, largely because, as I just mentioned, I wasn't really that religious when I got interested in these studies. So in many ways, at a very basic level, Islam brought me back to God, because I was raised a Christian and a Catholic specifically, and I believe in God to this day. And learning that Islam was a Abrahamic monotheistic religion that also had a lot of things to say towards Christianity and of Christians, and the way that some of my early professors pitched that was very interesting to me. So brought me back to monotheism, because for many years, I was agnostic, I would say. I wasn't an atheist. Like my dad, my mom's Catholic. My dad is like, you'd have to ask him who he is, if he's an agnostic or an atheist, but he's somewhere in between. And that impacted me. So Islam actually brought me back to God. And then, spending so much time, I think initially as a researcher, like that's how my exposure started. It was through research. It obviously became much deeper to the point of having friendships and genuinely loving the time I spend with my Muslim friends and their families. But to witness the commitment to faith, and not just in terms of practicing, like not practicing in terms of, meeting your prayers and reaching these big demands, but like living your faith, through human interaction and like being a good, humble, moral, forthright, dignified person. Like that's what I guess I just met some amazing Muslims early on in my journey who set a really good example. And I'm like, this person is religious. They're also a monotheist. And these people, I look up to these people. They're my role models. These are the people I want to be like. So practicing in terms of like how you interact with people, that's what inspired me.
Thank you. So you talk about education, the importance of education in the book, and it is the largest chapter. And it's my understanding, education is in all of the chapters. It's implicitly or explicitly, education is in all of them. And I also remember that you were a speaker in Respect Graduate School's The Antidote of All Problems, Education. So the question that raises is how important education is in the humanity of Muhammad.
Oof. Another excellent question. So when I think about Muhammad's early education, and obviously you can't talk about his humanity without understanding his life journey, from who he was from the very beginning and until who he was when he passed away. I mean, that's a person's life. That's their full life. That's their humanity in essence. And when I think about his early education, Muhammad never went to an educational school as we understood it today, in terms of having a teacher and having exams and having to get a grade and passing a test and going to a building. Muhammad's education really started when he was a young boy, not even a young man, a young boy, when he was with his uncle. That's where Muhammad starts traveling on trading caravans throughout not only the Arabian Peninsula, but throughout the region. And when you're traveling on a trade caravan and you're trading goods, you're going to go to locations and cities that have goods to trade. And a lot of the cities that they actually visited were pretty diverse. I wouldn't, they're not like, London and Tokyo and some of these modern cities today that diverse, but they're diverse. And I think Muhammad's appreciation for learning about other people, other groups, diverse groups in some of these, cities at the time, like, I think that that impacted him. I think he grew up with a lot more diversity than people kind of credit him for, at least when he was traveling with his uncle. So I think that actually is what triggered. And of course, he engages in this business of trading caravans well up into his, his adulthood. And when you're a successful merchant, as he was, you could not be successful without being literate, without being educated, So like to be educated for him was like to go without saying. Like you have, like that, this is a fundamental quality of life. Like you have to be, if you want to be successful, you have to be educated. That's how I saw it. And I don't think he ever made a conscious decision to say, I'm going to just learn about the world. Some people are just born into situations where they're exposed to groups, ideas, cultures, traditions. And he became a product of his environment in many ways.
So in the Western academia, that is my experience, the scholars, the non-Muslim Islamist or Orientalist or Western scholars in a large sense, usually ignore the aspect of revelation. But it's my understanding from your book, you kind of accept the revelation aspect of the Prophet Muhammad and the Quran. For example, in one place you say the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was guided by the revelation of God in terms of women's rights. So how do you understand, what is your understanding of Quranic revelation? Because it's a not new thing, but most of the scholars in the Western study of the Quranic studies do not either accept or ignore or avoid that topic, I don't know, but you genuinely talk about the revelation. What is your understanding of revelation?
Well, you got to go back, I think, to the time in which the revelation started, 610, and it's initiated by Angel Gabriel, who visited the Virgin Mary, who is a revered figure in my tradition. My wife is named after Mary. My mother's middle name is Mary. I mean, Mary's a big deal, to me at least, and I'm sure to other Catholics. And when you dig into Islamic history and you understand that Angel Gabriel not only visited Muhammad on that occasion, but was also with him on the night journey to Jerusalem, you start seeing kind of interesting parallels in terms of whether revelations could be true or not. Like I think that's the more interesting question to me. It's not whether do I accept whether these revelations are true or not. It's whether they could be true. And I think that question provides more hope and constructive kind of thinking. Because again, Quranic revelation, 610, Mount Hira, Angel Gabriel visited Zechariah as well, not only Mary. And then you actually dig into the Quran, and the Quran has obviously so much to say about Mary and Jesus. And of course, there are what people would say are fundamental differences according to, the Quran's position on the Trinity. And a lot of people would say, well, okay, well, God's revelation to Muhammad basically, blasphemed against Christianity because of this kind of deification of Jesus. But again, emphasizing knowledge, being interested in history and education, you go back into history and you realize that the history of Christianity is a lot more interesting than we think as well. And this idea of the Trinity, as a scholar, I look at the Trinity and I question the construction of it and the creation of it. As a Catholic, do I believe in it? I do. But as a scholar, you go back to the Council of Nicaea in 325, which is really where a lot of the, this begins. So the Quran's revelation, the process of the revelation to Muhammad, I believe in it. Do I believe in 100% of it? I mean, that doesn't, I don't know if that's a realistic thing, but I do believe in a lot of it. In the last chapter of the book, I even refer to some Christian revelation, even though it's not in the book of Revelations, of Muhammad being the spirit of truth as well.
Do you think that revelation as a common denominator would be a link among the Judaism, Christianity, and Islam? Moving on from that point, you talk about Judeo-Christian tradition and exclusion of Islam from Judeo-Christian tradition. Would you consider your book as an effort to include Islam into that tradition?
Yeah, I mean, to the second question, absolutely. But I'm going to get to the first question first. So revelation, or it wasn't a question, Ali, it was more of a point. But yeah, so revelation is not unique to, obviously, to Prophet Muhammad's experience on Mount Hira, but Jesus's life, and then going back to some of the older Abrahamic figures. I mean, revelation is part of the Abrahamic story, of the monotheistic story. And I think what I would like to see more of, not only in academic circles, but also in people's individual lives, is understanding that revelation is a very mystical, otherworldly, transcendental experience. So religion being something that can actually be experienced in a way that is joyful and exuberant, but somewhat confusing, and you're not sure how to make of it, rather than religion being you have to think this way, you have to do this way, you have to do this, and this is how it has to be. So yeah, thinking about revelation and mysticism, I wanted to get to that point before talking about the Judeo-Christian Islamic issue. And yeah, the third hyphen, the second hyphen has to be, linking Islam to Judeo-Christian. It really is, kind of boggles the mind how it's left out, because in many ways Islam is the kind of ultimate Abrahamic religion. It's coming after the first two kind of spheres of revelation, and kind of putting the icing on the cake, if we can say that. So yeah, it's the ultimate Abrahamic faith. So it must be included in this discussion. And I think the book itself is absolutely a testament about the linkages. We wouldn't exist, Christians wouldn't exist without the Jewish people. And religion, we have to think of it as fluid as well. It morphs over time and it evolves, and then Islam comes after Christianity, but it's all it's so similar, and we forget this a lot of the times.
So, it's my understanding that, all the themes, that all the connection that you make from the history, from, between Mevlana Rumi and Emerson, George Washington, and Prophet Muhammad, and all other people, it's all about the dialogue of civilizations. And it's all about, as you mentioned in the beginning, blending. So your book is a testimony to that third hyphenated Islam, if I may, tradition. So Judeo-Christian Islam, Muslim or Islamic tradition.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, there are many themes, large themes that you mention, you talk about, elaborate in the book. But one thing that because it's timely and pertinent, you describe Prophet Muhammad as anti-racist rather than simply non-racist. So what example would that give to the Muslims who live in the US, where racism is a really big issue?
Racism is perhaps the biggest issue, especially in this country. And what's ironic is that a great anti-racist figure and example comes through a tradition and a population which is often demonized in American society, which are Islam and Muslims. It's a kind of weird situation in which, like, the Islamic tradition, broadly speaking, I think most people who happen to be Muslims would say, like, racial equality is a big part of the faith. You know, like Islamic values, if we're taking that as an Islamic value, like that is like literally the medicine to help cure America for some of its issues today. Just a bizarre paradigm, I guess you would say. But Muhammad's legacy, I think, is anti-racist because he wasn't just merely being a non-racist, which is a person who does not hold beliefs of racial superiority. And of course, race is a modern concept and it's slippery. But, you know, generally speaking, as Stuart Hall mentioned, you know, people judge a person's race based on their body. And human beings have always judged people based on their bodies. And Muhammad was actually pushing his society and eventually humanity in all of history to move beyond this superficial categorizations of human beings. You know, just as your teachers, when you were younger, told you to not judge a book by its cover, Muhammad was telling people, don't judge a human by their cover, by their color. I think I mixed that up. Don't judge a book by its cover. Don't judge a human by their color. That's what Muhammad was saying. And we have examples of this, which I mentioned in the book. And I think the main one, which is inspiring and it's very relatable, is the relationship that he forged with Bilal ibn Rabah, who looked differently than the overwhelming majority of Meccans. You know, and of course, Mecca is the city in which Islam first emerged. And Bilal was half Abyssinian. And Abyssinia is a great Christian kingdom that has roots in the modern day region of Ethiopia in Northeast Africa, right across the Red Sea from the Arabian Peninsula. And so Bilal looked different. He looked darker. And once Muhammad starts revealing his revelations publicly around 612 or 613, Bilal becomes a steadfast follower. But Bilal was not a free person. He was enslaved. And Muhammad, knowing that Bilal was a firm monotheist, not only that, but a Muslim in the sense of some of the humane things that we were talking about, you know, just being a good person, being present, being respectful. And Muhammad takes a liking to Bilal. And there are a couple stories that stick out. You know, one time, another one of Muhammad's companions was criticizing Bilal and basically associating Bilal's behavior on Bilal's race. Abu Dhar al-Ghafari literally told Bilal, like, you're the son of a black woman. So, like, basically saying, okay, so the reason why Bilal acted this way was because he was black. That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous statement. And Muhammad told al-Ghafari, like, you are stuck in the age of ignorance, the Jahiliyyah. He's like, this idea of associating race and racial inferiority with a person that looks a certain way is not part of the Islamic tradition. Not only did that quote happen, but Bilal was actually freed by Muhammad and Abu Bakr. They literally purchased his freedom. So when you think about being anti-racist means that you're actually taking action to, dismantle the racist systems in a given society. To be non-racist is good. I'm not saying don't be non-racist, but to be non-racist just means that you hold a belief in which racial superiority does not determine how you treat people, but it doesn't necessarily dismantle anything or take action against anything. So Muhammad was an anti-racist. He was completely transforming society. People are just looking at him as a monotheistic prophet. Like this was a person who was a revolutionary. He came with completely different ideas, not only in terms of the races, but in terms of women, on how to treat orphans. And you can tell why people were so upset with him, because not only was he successful in moving people, in enlightening people, in elevating people, but his ideas, which were, I think, and I'll say it with all confidence, these ideas are coming from God. There's no question in my mind about that. These ideas, which are coming from God, are challenging the things that are wrong in society when they were revealed. And that's why the controversy happened.
Thank you, Dr. Considine. I lost the track of the time, so I'm sorry. So I do have lots of questions for you. Perhaps sometime, one-on-one, conversation. But now I guess it's the time to have the questions of the participants.
Great.
If you do have any question, please raise your hand or put that in the chat box. The floor is yours.
Have a wonderful night, everybody. I really liked your talk. My name is Mukaddes. My question is about the book. Is this. Let's suppose I am 16, 17 years old, high school student. I'm not very much interested in Islam, even if I were born in a Muslim family. I grew up in a secular environment. And I was just walking around the town. I saw a sign. I entered inside, and there was a book fair there. And you were there to sign your books. We met. I was so surprised because as a Christian man, you wrote such a book. Just because of that, I am interested in the book, but I don't want to read it because I'm not interested in Islam. How you are going to talk to me, how you are going to approach me, why I need to read your book. Could you please tell? Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a beautiful question. And I made sure to take notes. And I would say this to a young person, 16, 17, being a young American in those shoes at one time, to a random stranger, I would say a few things. This book is a book that tells a lot of good stories that are hopeful, that are promising, that are constructive, and that are relatable. Like you don't have to have even interest, I think, in religion or God to have interest in this book and the stories that are told in this book. For people who tend to be a bit more religious, but who are still kind of disinclined to religion because they don't think it's cool, which I understand because a lot of Americans are in those shoes, because that was me at one point. This book makes religion cool in a sense that it's relevant to terms that young people will be familiar with. So like when I talk about anti-racism, pluralism, tolerance, civility, a civic nation, I talk about allyship, a lot of these solidarity, community, a lot of these terms are in the daily lexicon of a lot of young Americans, regardless of faith. And those, I guess I wrote this book because like I wish I had read this book when I was 16 or 17. Of course, I can't go back and remake my history. I wouldn't be here if I didn't like religion at that point, I suppose. But you get what I mean, you know? Like I wish I was a better Catholic back then. I wish I could have read a book that made religion interesting like this.
Any other question?
Hi, Craig. Very nice to meet you. I'm reading right now your book because we have a book club in New Jersey. We are living in North Jersey, and I involve two book clubs. And then this is one of them. We pick your book. I'm so glad we start the book reading, and then next 2 weeks later we will discuss each other that book. But I have another question that always thinking about this. Sometimes I have a struggle because we have such a people always, even Muslim, even Christian, we have some story types for Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the other prophets. Jesus. I would like to ask, can you compare and contrast Muhammad and Jesus in your perspective? I think it's gonna give me a very good point when we try to explain because I think some of my friends, they know some about Islam, but Muhammad is not as much as we explain. And this book, it's going to be very helpful also at that point. Could you please, how can you explain, or how can you compare it to prophet and when you talk about?
Yeah, lovely question. And for those who, you know, have either read the book or like might be interested in reading the book, I do talk about the similarities between Jesus and Muhammad in the last chapter, which I think aptly refer to as the golden rule, which is to treat others how you wish to be treated. I think at the core, and again, it goes to that very micro sociological level of how Jesus and Muhammad just approached people and how they dealt with people like face to face in terms of being warm, full of light and integrity, being respectful, having honor. But more than that as well, when I think about Jesus and Muhammad, and in terms of the revolution that they initiated, we are talking about two individuals that were deliberately bringing the periphery of society back into the fold. And there's a beautiful Hebrew term that is linked to Jewish scripture, tikkun olam, to heal a fractured world. And I think Jesus and Muhammad were trying to bring these groups that have been completely neglected, that have been forgotten about, that have been wronged politically by corrupt people. They were trying to bring these people back into the fold through mercy, compassion, forgiveness, and love. That's the Jesus that was taught to me as a young boy. And that's the Jesus that matters to me as a young man. And when I see examples in Muhammad's life that are quite similar to this is very powerful.
Yeah.
It's very, very powerful. And, you know, it reminds us that, you know, our traditions are about something much greater, I think, than the details of how we might pray and so on and so forth. There's a bigger picture, in my opinion.
Thank you. It is very enlightening. Thank you so much.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Sadik. I'm speaking from Australia, and I just want to say thank you to Dr. Considine and all my friends back in America in the Chestnut community. I don't think you've realized, or you probably have realized, but you really have marked yourself as a scholar for the next few decades on Prophet Muhammad in American society. And that's I think will provide you a lot of opportunities, but a lot of challenges from the Muslim as well as the non-Muslim community. And I'm sure you're aware of the different I just was wondering, how do you see yourself where do you see your scholarship going now that you're going to become a point of reference on Islam, on the Prophet Muhammad and Islam? Where else would you like to pursue your academic expertise in this area? I'm currently doing my PhD in Hadith, so I'm just interested from that angle.
Thank you, Sadiq. I hope all is well in Australia. I don't know what time it is over there, but I know it's a massive time difference.
11 a.m. It's the middle of a summer day. And
Okay.
things get bad for you in America. I invite you to Australia.
I have family in Australia. So Sadiq, I would say with my scholarship, I mean, first and foremost, just making sure that my scholarship continues to be constructive. You know, the deeper I get into it, the more, as you mentioned, Sadiq, like you not only mentioned like non-Muslim opposition, but there's also a lot of Muslim opposition to it as well. And, you know, I'm not trying to ruffle feathers. I'll tell you that. I'm trying to continue to be constructive. You know, I'm not engaging in scholarship to be the top scholar. I'm here to create productive pieces of work that can be beneficial to society. But I will also shed light on my future pieces of scholarship. So there's a book coming out in May, published by Hearst, and it's called People of the Book, Prophet Muhammad's Encounters with Christians. And it's a historical analysis of the Christians that were living and interacting with Muhammad. It's also a history of Muhammad's interactions with those Christians. And it's also kind of a biography of Muhammad's humanity in many ways. So of course, people's books build on previous books. And then my next book after that, I'm actually moving away from Muhammad because I've been really focusing on him for quite some time now. And the second book, which I think will be out in 2022, is called The Culture of Encounter: Building Bridges Between Christians and Muslims. And this might be published by Polity. I'm in negotiation with Polity right now. And this book is based on 12 case studies of different countries around the world, looking at a contemporary and historical glimpse into Christian-Muslim relations in those settings. And Sadiq, what's interesting from a scholarly perspective, but unfortunate from a human perspective, is this: Christians around the so-called Muslim world are not treated very well. Muslims in the so-called Christian Western world are not treated very well. What is happening? What is happening here? If we are this close theologically, spiritually, religiously, if we've always coexisted at points in history, which I talk about in chapter 4 of The Humanity of Muhammad, what is happening? How can we be better? So that's the book after that. And after that, I don't know, I might retire from writing books for a little bit. It's pretty exhausting, to be honest.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to both of the books, particularly the third one you mentioned.
I wish I could send it to you via mail, but it would cost me probably an arm and a leg to Australia. And people need to recognize, like, authors are not wealthy people. People think that authors make like tons of money. No, not at all. Not at all.
Thank you.
Hi everyone. Hi from Egypt. It's night here. It's like 2 a.m. It was very enjoyable to meet you, Doctor. And I was asking the idea which you provide in your books, in your meetings, is very helpful to understanding the religion itself, if it's Muslim or Christian. So had you considered ever translating your book to Arabic? Because not only the people in Western society need the book, in Arab society too. So this is my
Saleh, like
question.
I wish, you know, it would be beautiful to have the book translated in so many languages, because it would just open up, for me, I mean, to be kind of selfish, so many friendships, which would be awesome. But also the idea of being able to share ideas and be kindred spirits with people around the world who speak different languages. I mean, that really interests me. I just don't know how I have the capacity to do that. You know, like I don't have an agent, I don't have a team. Sometimes people approach me to publish a book in a different language, like it happened with a book that's actually was published right before the Humanity of Muhammad in Indonesian by Nura Books. It's called Muhammad Nabi Kinta, the Prophet of Love. And yeah, that book is like right behind me here. But they approached me, you know, and it's just it's hard, you know, like it's hard to make those connections. It's very kind of business oriented, and I'm not very like business oriented. I am somewhat, I think, but I would love for it to be translated. But I would also want it to be a like a good publisher too, and not something you know, just done by like a single person. There would have to be some backing behind it, if that makes sense. And I can't translate it myself. I took Arabic for 3 years and that's about it, Sally, but I haven't, my Arabic is not sharp at the moment, unfortunately.
Dr. Considine, I believe Mr. Salih has friends in Egypt, you know, publisher friends. Probably that's why he was asking.
Well,
Yeah,
Exactly.
if you have any ideas, Sally, yeah, of course. I mean, like I said, for me, it's a beautiful thing, because when you open a book up or connect it to a different language, I mean, that's a group of people that I don't traditionally interact with. So I would love it. It would be fantastic.
Thank you. Any other question?
I have a question, please. I'm Kamal from Ghana,
Come on.
West Africa. I'm not
Welcome.
Ghanaian, but I'm in Ghana. Thank you for your beneficial speaking, Mr. Greg. I have a question. Now in Ghana, there is a community which nearly 75% Christians and 25% Muslims, but they are living, thanks to God, is very, very peaceful. There's no problem between them. If you can publish your book in here, it will be beneficial for all people here, I think. And inshallah, I will get it from soft copies. But if you can publish in hard copies, I think it will be beneficial. Thanks so much.
I would love to do that, Kamal. It'd be a blessing. I hope for other people too. And let me say too, Kamal, the book that I mentioned, The Culture of Encounter, Building Bridges Between Christians and Muslims, I have a chapter in which I focus on Mali and Nigeria, which is not too far from where you are, and looking at the history of Christian-Muslim relations and, of course, the contemporary context. Fascinating, like good and bad, you know, like you see the good of humanity and then you see the side of humanity that is unfortunate, you know.
Fortunately, there is many examples of good sides of relation between the Muslims and the Christians in Ghana. Now, it's near from us, that Nigeria and Mali, but I don't know about them. But in Ghana, there's many good examples. If I can take some few minutes, I will give you an example. Yesterday, I went a mosque. Just beside the mosque, there's a church. You can enter
beautiful.
the church, and you can enter the mosque, and it's very peaceful place. Yeah. So
honestly, Kamal, send me a picture. Send me a picture of that, because like those are stories and situations that I love to think about, to focus about. Like, let me add too, like I went to one, Kamal, in this situation where there's a mosque and church right next to each other. And I mean, right next to each other, in Las Vegas, in the quote, Sin City of America, where all of like the debauchery happens. And it was Imam Saifullah and Reverend Lee, two African-American men. And beautiful story, because they opened up a local clinic together to help underprivileged people dealing with a assortment of daily problems. I mean, these stories, imagine if mainstream media outlets changed their entire approach on how they talk about Christian-Muslim relations. Imagine in the morning, top news, breaking news, bishop and imam in Las Vegas joined forces to create a medical clinic to help the needy. Wow. How beautiful. It would never happen, obviously, because if it bleeds, it leads. We know that. But these are the stories that we need to tell the youth. These are the stories that are like, these are your role models right here. These are the people that we need to be following.
Exactly. But how can I send you if
Just send me a message. You can find a way to send me a message. Trust me, there's a lot of different ways. Yeah, just type it in.
I'm from Iraq, actually. I'm from Iraq, but I'm in Ghana.
Well, bless your journey wherever you go.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the questions. The questions were really great. I believe it's time for us to go our ways. Dr. Considine, it was really a great honor to have you on board with this event. I would like to, in the end, thank you for accepting our invitation and talking greatly and explaining the book and the concept and everything. Thank you for that. And I also would like to thank the participants for patiently listening and asking questions. It was really a great event. I really liked it and enjoyed it. I hope to see you next time in the next book talk with a new book. And good evening, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Ali, thank you. The Chestnut Center, thank you to all of you. Thank you as well. God bless each and every one of you. And hopefully one day we can meet soon in person, which would be even better. I feel like we're close to that. Thank you.
Dr. Considine, you're invited to our center.
I would love it.
Whenever you got a chance, please call me or email me. You know my email. Please come.
Okay, I will. God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thank you.